authority, and the costumes and figures of the dance are in many ways kind of pastiches of country dance, formal dancing. And that's one of the things that I like most about it, that it's had that transformation into something a little bit more, I don't know, folk. It's gained something different.
Well, and in that sense you say folk, and you mean it's like the people have taken it and done something with it in their own, which, and this is interesting, if you go to Slavic countries, the term is narodna music, or narodna igra, dance. This is Serbian. So narodna igra, well, igra is dance, and narodna actually is people's, apostrophe s, people's, and so they call their bank Narodna Bank, but it's actually people's music. That's the term for folk music. There's no folk in that language, so that's much more accurate and much more useful. Is this semiotics, or it's the words can obscure the meaning if you're not careful, and we that the importation of the term folk was just something done by a few people at a particular time, because it was actually from Wagner, his idea that there was a Volk which carried somehow the nation's identity.
Yes, this pure identity.
And people, it's so ironic that this does really go back to Wagner, even in the British use of folk as well, and the idea that there is that body, but so it is the music, folk music, if we use that term. And I'm thinking about the music that Butterworth collected before, and others, before World War I. Folk music was the music of normal people. It was the music of for them, the music they found, because it said the only thing they looked for was the music of the rural poor. That's what it was, and it was probably the music of southeastern England for the most part, or at least South Midlands, because there was all sorts of other stuff going on in other parts of England, and then you've got obviously Scotland and Wales, but it was at that time still the music of the rural poor.
It's interesting that process was happening at that time, because also at the same time was kind of a collecting or beginnings of ethnography in colonial sense around the world, and that in England this was some sort of kind of indigenous colonization of the traditions of England, and that was one thing that I kind of had an affinity with these aspects of English culture when I was first interested in English folk culture, because it was rural and poor people. It wasn't like high culture; it was low culture. And that was one of the things that I felt most comfortable in these traditions.
And you were asking why I got into Butterworth's story, but I really first knew of him as a collector. So not really I didn't listen to his music and then learn later on, my God, he collects folk songs. That's how I knew of him first. I mean, I think I knew at the same time actually that he did both, but my interest in him was as a collector, and in the idea that wondering what really happened before World War One, because you hear the name Cecil Sharp gets bandied around, you hear other names, and you just think, well, I wonder what actually did happen. So then you start to find out, and you do a lot of reading, and people who've done all this research, and all the critiques have changed. The Marxist era in the late 80s, when The Imagined Village was published, Dave Harker as well, who criticised the collectors for stealing, appropriating the culture of the working classes and turning it into whatever their own thing, which they did in a way, but it was there was no science of ethnomusicology when they were doing this. They were pioneers in England, and they in fact laid a foundation for ethnomusicology to become a thing after World War One. And the International Folk Music Council was founded in London in 1935. by Maud Carpelleys was the first secretary, and Vaughan Williams was the honorary president. And the idea was to have a meeting once a year where folk researchers, if we call them that, from all over the world would come together and compare notes, because they wanted to bridge borders and share research and share findings, because they were well aware that dances and songs didn't respect borders. So, you know, these people in researching Morris dancing in Oxford were reading about this sword dance on the island of Korčula in Croatia. Well, we need to compare notes, and well, it wasn't that easy to go there in those days, so actually they did go there, some of them, but that meant that they could get together and have this festival every year and have displays of the dancing. And in 1935 there was a huge festival in London, you know, with all these folk dancers in costume hanging around on the buses and stuff. You know, Calusari in their full regalia, just walking on a boat on the Thames. There's all these photos that still exist. And that,
where are the photos?
In Vaughan Williams Library, and in the Peter Kennedy archive as well, which is at Holsway Manor. And the impulse behind that was to bring people together, after World War I as well in everyone's mind, and then of course ironically it gets interrupted by World War II. So really, they did one meeting in 1935. And in fact, there was a team of German dancers in London, and this is obviously under Hitler's rule in 1935, but they still came.
The Nazis were really big on folklore.
Well, that's another matter, isn't it? But they thought they were anyway. Yeah, and the Soviets had a go at licensing traditional culture as well. And which the film Cold War, you see Cold War by Pavel Pawlikowski, it's all about the Polish folk dance troops, the official folk dance performances that happened after World War II, and they had schools where they trained people youngsters to dance in the traditional manner, wearing the national costume, but it's all staged.
Yeah.
But so this is the interesting thing, is that actually you do have to be hardcore, and you have to say any dance that is not taking place in a village, done on a certain date because that's the date when it always happens, or for a certain reason, or after a certain meal, by people who live in that village and who've learned that from other people before them, is no longer a traditional dance. It's a staged
it's a re-performance.
Yeah. And that was Maud Carpelleys' line, and she used to get loads of flack for that. And I mean, she did have other ideas that were very old and stuffy, but the Serbian collectors, the Jankovic sisters, who were contemporaries with her, started collecting folk dances all across Yugoslavia from 1921 onwards, and they were wealthy professional librarians who went off in their holidays and did this. But they kind of established this scientific ways of recording the dances, and they had the same definition of saying we cannot classify anything that's done in a town as a folk dance. It's a performance. It's staged, and it's fine. Do that and show us so we can watch it and study it, but don't call it folk dance or narodna either. It's something else.
So that's another aspect of the definition of folk, that it's rural.
Well, authenticity, isn't it, and things like that. So, but then you can get into that, and then people say, well, I'm within the village, I'm more authentic than you because my family's lived in this village. So it gets, authenticity is a funny one, really. But I think the main thing is that the music and maybe the dances were seen up until 1880 were dismissed or ignored as being the pastime of just village idiots, like Alan says in the film, country bumpkins. Suddenly then, people like Butterworth, they realised that was nonsense, and there was some amazing music out there, amazing tunes, and they wanted to break down that barrier between high and low culture, which was why they were so radical and controversial at the time. I don't have it with me, but I've got a quote which didn't make it into the film about a reviewer from 1912 talking about Vaughan Williams, actually, but he's interchangeable with Butterworth in that era, in a sense. And the reviewer is saying, it's one thing for a scholar like Dr. Vaughan Williams, which he was, to